Good morning and welcome to a special edition of the Monday Call. Iran attack is the discussion for today. And we have with us Paul de Klerk, based out of Dubai, who is a long-standing and veteran financial advisor who's long worked with NZ funds and recently made the leap across the ditch and beyond into the Middle East. And also James Grigor, investment strategist, who will be talking about the portfolios we manage and what the developments in the Middle East mean for clients and advisors alike. Today's section or presentation will be in two sections. First, we'll be talking with Paul, and then we'll be jumping over to James. Paul, welcome. It's really great to have you here. You're calling in, I think it's around midnight from Dubai at the moment, and I thought we'd start with, if you wouldn't mind telling us just a little bit of background about your connection to Dubai and how it is that you find yourself there today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Long-standing financial advisor in New Zealand. September last year is when I shifted over to Dubai because there's some opportunities presented themselves at the moment. So I do a lot of consulting work as well, and there's a very large hedge fund regulated and it's based in Abu Dhabi, but offices here in Dubai, London, New York as well, and I do some consulting for them. Yeah, and also a bit of trading work. I've been a long time futures trader in the financial markets as well, and that's what created the connection with the hedge fund. So some things I share with them there in that front as well. Yeah, that's how I ended up in Dubai, and it's quite a good place actually.
But a lot's been happening recently. Over the last few days, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about what it's been like for you and what are the developments that you've been experiencing?
Sure. Well, the first hint that there was a little bit of something coming was, I think, Thursday, when I read on Twitter, the American embassy in Jerusalem evacuated its staff, especially its non-essential staff. And then we at the fund were thinking, oh, that's interesting. They don't do that lightly. So there might be something coming. And so started speaking to some clients, expecting what's coming. And then by Saturday, I was just busy throwing weights around inside of the gym in the morning. It was about 9 in the morning and hearing a couple of bangs outside and then people looking around. It's like, well, that was interesting. What's that? And then the news starts spreading when you turn on the Twitter feeds and you see what's going on. And then the government here, the Dubai government is extraordinarily fast and quick with their communication, telling us to, what's going on. So everybody immediately knew what was happening in terms of the communication. It was quite interesting to experience that. And by Saturday, we started to realize, okay, there is a lot of bangs going on. There's a lot of explosions, that sort of thing, but nothing's getting through. So the missile defense system here is extraordinarily good. And so while there does seem to be some things have gotten through, the Fairmont Hotel was struck. No casualties as far as I know. There, one of our clients actually lives there. And so it's a little bit surreal. You come from New Zealand, not much of this happens. I've been through 2 earthquakes there. I went through a tropical cyclone storm in the Gold Coast last year as well. That was interesting. And then I come here and now there's new challenges. It doesn't matter where you go in the world, there could be some things that you face, but Dubai is extraordinarily resilient and their brand is execution. And so their response has been stunningly good.
And have you noticed sort of visible security changes on the ground or sort of posture by the government that was different from a few days ago?
Well, life just seems to have continued. I mean, there's noticeably less cars on the road. It has been the weekend. So it's hard to know what's going to happen tomorrow and how, will people be going into work? Have they been told to stay home or in work from home? We're going to see what happens in a few hours. But the government response has been very, very good in terms of the communication and getting the word out. The phones goes off with the alert systems if there's anything coming, hunker down. And so a lot of people are just still out. I went to the beach today. I went to the gym today, and people out there in restaurants, they're eating, they're drinking, they're doing their thing, and they're living their lives. There is an air of understanding that this is serious. So it's a little bit somber, and people are quick to respond, but they're stoic. And don't let I've seen a lot of things on Twitter and online as well saying the sky is falling over Dubai, and it's just a nightmare scenario. So while the situation is serious, it's not quite like it's being portrayed by many people online. So what has really impressed me is His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum over here. You can tell he genuinely cares for his people, and not just these people, but also the residents here, and in the whole communication and how things have gone. You can sense that. It's been quite nice to experience. Yeah.
Paul, how do they communicate? Is it just mostly those notification sort of emergency alerts on the phone? Is it through the usual channels of TV, or is it sort of more social media and things? 'Cause that's an interesting way to, how in these situations technology takes such a front foot in communicating with the
Mm.
people.
Yeah, a lot has been on Twitter because I've been following all of the major feeds of the Ministry of Defense and these things. But the phone, especially if there's something incoming to where they know that you are, they can geolocate you, it seems. So if something's coming into my area, then my phone will go off. And so got some friends and clients out in the Dira area, and they said to me they had an alert on their phone about 20 minutes ago, something coming there, but nothing landed. So it's the emergency alert system is being utilized a lot, and it's very good. But it really does make you jump out of your skin when your phone just suddenly does this almighty scream. And yeah, it's quite jarring at times, but you definitely hear it. So yeah, not going to miss
And
those communications.
from your apartment, you've been able, can you witness things, sort of missiles being shot down, or any they get through?
Yeah, well, just the other side of my building here, I can't see it from my view, but on the other side is the Burj Khalifa, and so it did seem to be targeted, but they were intercepted. And the swimming pool area here in my building it's a central little spot, and we were sitting there, and all the residents lying around enjoying a drink, lying by the pool, and you can hear the interceptions of the missiles being intercepted, and there'll be a bang every few minutes. So you can see it, you can hear it, sometimes you can feel it. Even down at the beach today, you can hear every few minutes one of them gets intercepted, and then you just see the heads pop up. Oh, so they try to. Everyone's calm, nobody's panicking,
Real.
very stoic. Yeah,
Real.
quite interesting. They've risen up to it, haven't they? Yeah.
And do you notice a difference in how the expat community is feeling compared with the locals? Because it has a huge community, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, you can tell I'm not one of the locals with my accent. Um, I'm South African born, but lived 20 years in New Zealand. 100,000 South Africans in the UAE, apparently. About 4,000 Kiwis, about 25,000 Australians. Very big. 90% of the population are expats, not Emirati. They're not born here. A little bit early for me to tell their individual response. Um, it's early days. The Emiratis, from the ones that I know, very stoic. They got tremendous faith in their government and in their rulers over here, and they know operationally things will get taken care of. If Iran doesn't calm down with these attacks, there seems to have been some hints that they're going to respond themselves. So hopefully, though, they started to run out of resources, and this thing will start to calm down. But I don't know, from the local expat point of view, it depends, I guess, where you're from. South African, I'm kind of my experience in the past with these sorts of things a little different to somebody, say, from New Zealand that hasn't had the same level of, exposure to these things, because New Zealand's a wonderful place where, for the most part, we can be isolated from these things. That's why everyone loves New Zealand, loves going there as well. I miss it. But yeah, we'll see come Monday when the phones start ringing and start speaking to more people again, how they're responding.
Yeah. Do you have a sense how the professional community, business and financial firms are responding or likely to respond? Does it change how they're going to operate, or is
Yeah.
business as usual, as you sort of indicating?
Well, I think a lot of business continuity plans are getting taken off the shelf, dusted off, and read through. And there's been a lot of phone calls to customers and clients around the world, just wanting to know, what does this mean for our portfolios, for the markets. And so professionally, I don't know, we always like to think to ourselves that preparedness is better than prediction. So we'll see how the markets respond in a few hours when it opens. It's going to be interesting times. But I don't know. Professionally, I like to tell people, don't be making any big decisions right now until you have more information about what's to go. Volatility is going to be a given. It happens in the market right now. It responds. It's interesting. When I went to the beach today, I saw a lot of the ships that you didn't really see. They're just ships parked off, just sitting there out in the distance. I thought that's interesting. I hadn't seen that before, but apparently there's an issue with insurances. So they're just sitting there now because freight and goods. I saw one report that one of the oil tankers got struck off the coast of Oman. So oil prices could likely be affected by this. And if the strait's going to be closed, that can be interesting. China might have a little bit of a problem now with the oil supply that we know comes from Iran a lot. So it's going to be interesting times in the markets when they open in a few hours.
Yeah, very much so. And then in terms of how the sense it feels, so if you had to characterize it, would it feel like it's escalating, or is it stabilizing, or is it something else?
I don't feel like it's escalating. Yeah, just from my perspective, from what I see, I don't think it's escalating. If anything, I think this was building for a while. It was a pressure cooker that was building up, and it's popped off. I heard one report that there's been as many projectiles sent towards the UAE as towards Israel. The missile defense system here has been outstanding, but nothing gets through. So well done to the rulers here again. But it doesn't feel like it's escalating. I don't even particularly feel unsafe, right? I know it sounds strange. You hear these explosions and you hear the things going on, but there's no panic. There's no chaos. The country, you get a sense of, is rising together, and its rulers have it under control in the communication. And so it doesn't feel like it's escalating, but it does feel like, to me, I'm optimistic. I think that the world is going to be an optimistic, better place in the end when it gets through this. The only way through out of this is through it. And so I think the world is going to be a better place when we come through this out the other end.
Okay. My last question, Paul, these have been really insightful comments, and it's great to have an opportunity to talk to someone who's right there feeling it now. But when you compare what a couple of days ago, how you would have expected you see things, have there been any surprises to you in the process besides the effectiveness of the missile system?
Well, my wife and I arrived here in September, and she made an interesting comment to me today. She said the response by the government and the authorities has really, she feels a sense of commitment to the country now, in the sense of this, but how they've responded, you can feel how I'm being very sincere about this. They genuinely do care. So you're feeling a sense of loyalty start to rise up within yourself now, just being here. And so even when you asked earlier about the expat community, it's just, I didn't really even think of it in terms of the expat community. I just we all seem to be in this together, and everyone's rising to it together. And expats or local Emirati, we feel like one. And so in myself, the interesting feeling I'm having is I'm having a greater appreciation for the country and for what it provides. And it is safe and it is secure. It's the business that gets conducted here. It feels like it's becoming a new financial center of the world. Very easy to do business, very easy to network, very easy to do what you want to do. And this is just, my wife was saying, well, how long are we going to live here? And she said to me today, we can live as long as we want. I actually don't mind anymore. This is actually fantastic. You can feel the way they're looking after us here. So even comes down to, I heard reports today, Dubai airport is basically not operating. Tens of thousands of people affected, and the local government here is making sure that everything that they put in the bill for everything, accommodation, food, everything, to take care of everybody. Even if you're just transiting through, they will look after us. So that feels nice. It feels nice to be.
Yeah, there was a RNZ reporter on the news this morning talking about the hotel that the government have put him in is nicer than the hotel he was staying at when he was there on holiday. So I think despite the seriousness of the situation, he was pretty pretty overwhelmed with the government response and the efficiency at which it's happening, as if perhaps they were prepared, which says a lot about the leadership.
Authorities will probably turn up and say, "Yeah, you still want to go home? Now I'm good.
Yeah.
Stay a bit longer."
But you do need to go to bed. So, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. And we really appreciate your comments and insights, and look forward to seeing you in person again sometime in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I should be in New Zealand next month, actually.
Okay, we'll jump over to James. James, to start things off, would you mind talking a little bit about how NZ Funds has been thinking about this? As in many respects, it's not a great surprise that it has escalated in the region.
I think it's important to try in all these conversations to separate what we can control and understand and what we have no ability to understand and control. What's happening and what will happen in Iran is incredibly complex, and we've been on the phones all weekend with some of the experts we work with, and even the small amount of knowledge I've gained over that weekend has been phenomenal around what's the intent of the US, what's the likely leadership going to look like in Iran from now. And this is not a dictatorship like Russia. This is a country who has a very broad-based leadership across a lot of different organizations. And so to suggest that all of a sudden things change and things will be great and it will be a smooth transition and then we'll have elections and we'll get on.
Democracy will prevail.
Yeah, is just not the case. But we don't know what's going to happen. It's sort of, if you claim you know what's going to happen, you probably don't understand it enough. And I think we have to be careful with what we think might play out. But there were absolutely things that we have looked at from things that are in our control from a manager of our clients' wealth that has been apparent and has been, I think, apparent for quite some time, and we've been able to prepare for an event like this. I think that what we learnt from other awful situations like Ukraine is that it takes some time for a military to build up and get ready to do something like this. And we saw that in Ukraine. And when governments commit to the amount of firepower that they have put on a border or in the naval capacity, they tend to want to use it. So in January, we've talked on this podcast before about we were in Hong Kong, and it became very apparent, not just because we were in Hong Kong, but a lot of the discussions we were having that something like this could happen and would happen. And really it wasn't, the delay wasn't perhaps based around the negotiations that were going on, albeit, who am I to say that they weren't sincere? But it was more that things like little small bits of information like the USS Gerald Ford, which is their big aircraft carrier, hadn't got into place yet. So they're not going to do anything until that does. So you felt like you had some time. You didn't know what was going to happen, but something could have happened. And then we were able to think about, well, what are the consequences of something happened? And really, Paul touched on it as well. It comes down to the initial reaction function on some sort of conflict in this area is the Strait of Hormuz and oil. And so the Strait of Hormuz is an area, if you look it up on the map, where a lot of the oil from Kuwait, Iraq, Iran, Saudi does flow through to go to the rest of the world. And it's about 20% of global oil supplies goes through that strait. Not to be confused at all with the Suez Canal, which is the next sea over, which is on the Red Sea, which we'll touch on a bit later perhaps. But it also is, it's even more than 20% for LNG. So if we just have a real quick think about the announcement by the New Zealand government about wanting to get LNG terminals rather than look for LNG or gas ourselves in New Zealand, we're going to be much more susceptible to that global price. Well, this is one of those reactions. So when 20% of world oil supply stops moving, so it's not about there's not enough oil, it's about moving the oil to where it needs to be. And when 20% of those movements stop, that is going to cause volatility and price spikes in oil, and then it has ramifications because of that for a whole host of reasons. The interesting thing about the Strait of Hormuz closing is there is no blockade. There is no naval fleet from Iran stopping it. It's exactly what Paul said. It's an uninsurable area of shipping. So if you have an oil tanker that is filled with oil or is empty and is going to go get some oil, you are not covered by insurance and they're not going to go get it. And so this is why you have a lot of ships anchored off the waters in Dubai and all around that area, not going to get oil, or else not delivering oil if they have it, because they're uninsurable, and these, the cost of something were to happen is irrecoverable for some of these shipping companies, so they need the oil.
Better to pause than to risk
Better
it.
to pause, and so they've been able to effectively put in a blockade without it. So we have had it has not been a low probability that something like this was going to happen. So what do we do? Well, the first thing we do is we want to make sure that the portfolios are not going to react in a way that is sort of too exposed to sort of oil, but from a negative side. So what does that mean? So, there are certain companies, maybe shipping companies or things you want to stay out of. So you have to be really specific about sector. But from a general macro point of view, we have some oil futures exposure. So we don't invest in actual oil, but we have some price exposure in the portfolios as a hedge if something like this was to happen. So if oil does spike, which it's expected to do when markets open around midday New Zealand time, we expect oil to spike 10-20%. That we have some exposure there, and that is to offset what the volatility around some of the shares. We also have our safe haven assets within the portfolio. So again, in January, when we were setting this up while we were in Hong Kong, we've got the oil, that direct hedge exposure, that's sort of 0.1. We also know we have to have some safe haven assets. You have to be invested. You have to have your capital put somewhere. And there are some assets that are generally good places to be in environments like this, and things like gold, the US dollar, and also things like US bonds.
And so that's when the flight to safety, so to speak, when people feel that the environment's become more risky, the marginal buyer will look to safer assets rather than shares, for example. That's right, isn't it, James?
Yeah, and we the thing about January and what was the catalyst was, one, we thought that this was a possibility of happening, but two, if you remember the volatility in January, actually due to AI and perhaps volatility caused by technology and something else. Well, this was a good opportunity to increase our positioning in some of these assets in preparedness for this at really good prices. And so and it's not to make light of a tough situation, and it's not all about profiting. It's about hedging portfolios to make sure they're stable through an environment that's volatile. And so with the oil, with the gold, US bonds, US dollar, those are providing a good stability for the portfolio if we see volatility this week. On the share portfolios, one, it's to remain incredibly liquid. And so we are very liquid in the holdings that we have using futures contracts, and also the individual names that we hold and Fisher investments in the US hold for us are very liquid, very high market cap or large market cap companies. But also on the shares, we have hedging within those as well. So we have put options, which means it's like an insurance policy. If share markets go down, these put options go up in value, and they take some of the underperformance of shares off the table because you've got this insurance policy. And that's if markets fall by sort of 10%, we'll be able to shock absorb some of those losses. Don't forget, we also have Universa in the portfolio. Now, that's for a large equity market sell-off of 20% or greater. That has always and will always be in the portfolio there for some sort of market reaction, which we are not ready for. We can talk about, perhaps the extent to which global shares will sell off. We're not expecting a 20% global sell-off at all, but universe is there if it is. And we have some other hedges within the portfolio around interest rates coming down dramatically. If things were to get really tough, we think that interest rates in the US and Europe will come down. And we also have some exposures there to also help mitigate that action, because when you see that, it's probably likely that shares are under a little bit of pressure too. So that's kind of the setup. And this was all implemented over the last 7 weeks, but a lot of that was done in January, which means you don't have to then sit there being reactionary now. What are we going to do when markets open at midday? Well, nothing, because we're set up and ready to go. If anything, we will look to take off some of these hedges as they sort of give us some performance, or leave them on if in fact nothing happens. So, sometimes you can see some strange things happen in markets when, oil can go down but a little bit before it goes back up, and those sorts of things. But it's an environment which we have always said, markets don't repeat, but they do rhyme. This is similar to, we think, the build-up in Ukraine, similar to what was going on in some other, around tariffs and things like that, where we saw things coming, and we can position the portfolios accordingly. And so we are really comfortable that the portfolios are really well positioned for any volatility that happens. And that's really important and comforting. And it also allows us to be front-footed in when things do happen, that we can really move the portfolios whichever way we can, either more positively or defensively, depending on what's going on.
And that's one of the benefits of having such liquid assets. If people often don't think about liquidity being important until it becomes really important. And so the platform enables our investment managers to respond appropriately to either in advance, as is the case here, or if there's new information that arrives in response retroactively.
Yeah, and notice that none of this is because we think regime change is going to happen or anything like that. That is far beyond our expertise. What we're trying to do is we want to be comfortable that whichever way the market behaves, that we are in a position where we can make sure our portfolios are first and foremost position that they don't get affected too much by what's going on, but also, continue to do what they're supposed to do, which is grow in the growth portfolio 7 to 10% a year over compounding over a 20-year period. And that's what we're trying to play for.
One of the things that really stood out to me about, and this is in no way intended to, diminish the significance of it from a human point of view, but during the beginning of the Ukraine period, it was the headlines for a long time, and a lot of people were really worried about it. I guess a sort of political and economic contagion that would flow from it, and there was a fair amount of volatility at the time. But it was the breadbasket of the world, people would say. Lots of trade was being locked up, and gas prices moved dramatically, as you know. Oil prices moved a little bit. And today, obviously a few years on, share markets were trading at record highs. And a lot of the conflict persists, but the businesses find ways to adapt and continue. And it's, I guess Paul alluded to it earlier, it's hard to kind of get a sense of if things are continuing and the significance of it, the actual proportionate size of it. And so how do you think about that from an investment standpoint? Obviously, Iran's an important oil exporter to parts of the world, but it's also not a huge economic contributor to the global economy. Or would you look at it differently?
No, I think that's exactly the way that we look at it. Iran as an exporter of oil isn't actually that big. It's the Strait of Hormuz and oil coming out of not just Iran, but lots of different countries flowing through that strait. And so Iran, the economy is been decimated by sanctions, and it's if anything, it's a drag on global growth. And hopefully for their people, this can be a catalyst of change where that can turn around. But the way that we said, and I think you put it nicely, this is not to say that it's not a horrible situation for the civilians involved right now, but from a market's point of view, this is a very small area in terms of that has an effect on the markets that we invest in. And what do I mean by that? Well, share markets are dominated by US shares, but also developed world and China, and share markets react and go up and down over the long term because of earnings. And earnings will be, if at all, very negligibly affected by what's going on in the current status. Now, there could be some inflation upswing because oil prices go up, but even then we don't expect that to be a long-term situation because there's plenty of oil out there. It just needs to get to the place that it needs to get.
And in fairness, it's a price shock rather than core inflation going up. So.
Exactly. And so central banks are unlikely to react to that by putting up rates. If anything, being a price shock, they sometimes tend to reduce rates, which hence we have the investment in US government bonds as sort of a hedge for these sorts of things to happen. So we actually think that markets will rewrite the narrative pretty quickly, and this situation could take quite a long period of time to play out from a geopolitical point of view. But from a market's point of view, being brutally honest, it will likely move through it pretty fast, and the market will start focusing back on things like earnings growth of companies, predominantly in the US, Europe, and China, and that narrative doesn't really change. And so for us, it's about having some insurance or shock absorbers for the initial shock, but actually the way that we think about, or our playbook going forward, is actually taking some of that insurance payoff that you get, i.e. the assets that go up in value during times like this. You actually use that to then buy back into a market that might be weaker, and that gives you an ability to sort of just stay invested, and also pay off these insurance premium things that we have in our portfolio aren't free; they cost money. And so if they go up in value, it's about paying those premiums off and then reinvesting that money back into the market. And so you can continue to drive portfolios going forward. But we don't see this as being something that affects markets over a long period of time. There's nothing inherently wrong with the inner workings of the US economy or anything like that, which is the main driver. New Zealand shares unlikely to be affected. There'll certainly be some rotation out of different industries and sectors. I think if this continues to play out for some time, things like airlines and airports and things might be affected, but it's not something that we're overly concerned about having, like COVID, where there was potentially a risk around earnings across the whole economy. This is very different,
much narrower.
Yeah, and we've seen it before, and we see that it can actually turn around, brutally, honestly, very quickly and move on pretty fast.
Okay, and so one counter argument is the idea that it spreads into a huge regional conflict, and then that translates into significant economic shock in developed nations. How do you think about that, given the portfolio construction as it stands today?
So when we think about portfolio construction, if we think about the growth portfolios, around 80% of the driver of those portfolios are shares, and that's split between New Zealand and global. And within that global, it's nicely diversified between US, broadly, US, Europe, and China. Now, within those markets, a lot of the drivers of those companies, are they going to be affected long term by a large regional conflict? No. But will there be volatility? Likely to be. If this was to, be an elongated big conflict and, with a lot of countries involved. but we will be happy to, be held in those liquid assets. It's a good place to have money in a diversified range across a number of countries, and companies and sectors. But there are other assets within the portfolios that other 20% of those growth portfolios, which are well positioned and set up specifically for environments like this. So we're talking about commodities and precious metals. Those tend to do well in environments like this, especially the precious metals like gold. So we've got a position in gold in the growth portfolios. Commodities, we've got a smaller position within our other commodity complexes, so mainly copper. Is this conflict going to stop the build out of AI and data centers and more energy requirements and electric cars? I can't see that happening and coming to a halt. So the demand for copper remains. So if anything, some sort of sell off in copper and those sorts of commodities would be a good opportunity to rebuy them back into the portfolios. We've got these hedges within the portfolio around interest rates coming down faster than we think. But that is actually related to, just general conditions that, perhaps people are overplaying how fast rates are going to come down in the US anyway. And this could just, push it along a bit faster. So those are nicely uncorrelated view around what's going on in the US economy around interest rates. So, and then we've got Universa, who I described. So actually we're really well positioned, and that if things were to get worse, God forbid, then things will, in the portfolio, those hedges that we have, the downside mitigation around Universa, and the assets like gold and US dollars that we have in the portfolio will do very well, and will just provide even more support for the portfolio. So if things get worse, those sorts of positions within the portfolio do get better, and so we're comfortable, and it cushions
and enables you to stay invested the whole time.
The whole point about this is not trying to be smart and trying to pick and choose what's going to go up in a conflict. The entire purpose of what we're trying to do is keep clients invested in a portfolio that's going to compound 7 to 10% over the long term, beat term deposits and beat inflation. And we think we're really well positioned to get there. One thing that does stop clients compounding year after year over time is taking their money out. And most people, unfortunately, redeem their funds when markets are going through volatile periods or are down. And what we try and do is provide a shock absorber to that. So when they look at the volatility and then look at the portfolio, it's performing perhaps more in an environment when it's volatile and your portfolio is behaving less volatile than when what's happening in the market, then you're less likely to redeem, and that's what we're trying to do.
It's uncorrelated with the headlines.
Yes.
That's about not even markets, really.
Yeah.
Okay. And just you touched on AI and the build out. We've recently sent a publication out to clients, and for those of you who are listening who haven't yet received it, it's on its way, talking about AI and the build out and the long-term economic impact that can have. How do you think that interplays with what's going on in the Middle East, if at all? And how do you see, this changing the growth profile that AI and the build out to support it, as it plays out, whether this has any bearing on it at all?
I think what's happening at the moment creates volatility. The AI build out and the huge change in the technological makeup of society and therefore markets continues unabated, and so they are almost completely separate. Other than you could perhaps link oil to energy prices to this, but really that's
quite remote.
That's remote and probably quite short term. So what does that all mean? Well, it means that we would be looking at if any of these companies or sectors that are well exposed to this theme get affected by what's going on, it's something that we would take note of and look to reinvest in those assets. But the other thing is these companies will look past it. The share market's brutal in that sense. It looks at, I keep using that word brutal, but what I mean is that the share market is unemotional, and they will look through this and look at the thing that drives earnings, and the likelihood that any of this changes because of what's going on in that region is unlikely. I've spent plenty of time in the region in my past career and with the NZ Defence Force, and things go on in that region all the time that are just not reported, and share markets don't even know about it. Now, this is quite a big situation, but I would suggest that it becomes more and more part of the daily news flow, and then companies go back to doing what they do best, which is whatever their sector and geography is. And so that's the reality of markets, but it's also why we have a very diversified portfolio across a number of companies and regions and sectors, and that's something that's done on purpose in case something very specific to a certain sector or region happens.
The brutal reality. It makes me think again of Ukraine. I mean, the war continues, and I guess the share the share of headlines that Ukraine collects today versus where it did 3-4 years ago is a very small percentage, and yet there's no major change there.
Yeah, and we are very conscious that things happen totally outside of our control at NZ Funds, and we are very, very therefore focused on things like liquidity, on things like having different tools in our toolbox to be able to, I guess, react to these sorts of things in a really measured, constructive way without needing that expertise on Iran-US conflict history and those sorts of things. And so our decisions don't have to be, should we be in cash or should we be in shares? We can actually do things so we can stay fully invested throughout the situation. And so we're not there sitting in cash as markets recover. And that's kind of the learning that I think a lot of the market got from COVID. It was, oh no, something really bad's happening. We're going to cut all our share exposure. And it was the 4th of April, sort of merely 3 weeks after the volatility struck, that markets kept going up, and the rest is history. And so it's a matter of not being overly consumed by the headlines, as you were saying before.
Ken Fisher, who founded the investment firm, one of our Fisher Investments who we partner with, he has that great phrase, the great humiliator, where the share market is the great humiliator. The idea being that you can have all these beliefs and as a human or as an analyst, but it doesn't care. And ultimately, the one thing, as James said, is earnings growth and the direction of that will determine over the long run how particular shares perform. Okay, so I guess to summarize, we've already pre-positioned the portfolios for the expectation that there would be developments coming down the pipeline, and hold a range of safe harbor assets. It's likely that there'll be some share market volatility, but that's just ordinary course, and we do have some protections in place for that. The oil, we believe there's a good chance it will spike a little bit, 5, 10, 20%, which is an opportunity potentially to take some of the hedges off, and I guess the investment team will be considering that. And then I guess the bigger picture is the earnings profile for the businesses that are within the portfolios continue to be strong as the global economy trucks forward, and there's lots of things to be positive around beyond what's happening in the Middle East. So I think I've paraphrased it all correctly, James, but it feels like a well constructed and thoughtful approach to how a portfolio could be constructed for this.
Exactly. You're never going to know what's around the corner in global markets and geopolitics. This one, I think, was a special case, and we positioned the portfolios for that. For the ones that we can't predict, we have Universa,
Yeah.
and we're comfortable that this all allows us to stay invested and do what we are good at, which is generating returns for the long term. And I would look at the tools for those clients and advisors listening. There are many tools where we can communicate a lot of this now because of technology that we talked about with Paul around the communication from the Dubai government. It's the same as NZ Funds to our clients. So we have the digital wallet, we have our portfolio profiles, and they have all of our holdings, which sort of I guess the importance of that is I guess showcasing how liquid the assets that we have are,
And diversified.
Across a number of holdings, and also different areas and sectors. Stephan, you mentioned our investment outlook. It doesn't mention Iran at all. It talks about AI, like you said, and I think that's really important to stay the course on what we think will drive markets over time. If something does happen, though, you'll get to hear the dulcet tones of us on our podcast whenever we think. We're every 2 weeks on a Monday, but also we'll happily come on here for another special edition. Our advertisers will be happy. Oh, wait a minute, we don't have any to come on for a special edition and talk about the portfolios if need be. And so, there's always a communication that will be put out if we think it warrants it.
Yeah, and your financial advisor is a great place and a great if you have any questions as a client, they'll be able to answer them, and if there's something more technical that they're unable to answer, so to do with what's inside the portfolio or so forth, that we're in regular contact with advisors across the country and routine even, and so please feel free to contact them, and they'll be able to guide you on your thoughts and so forth. But from our experience, the way you harness the power of financial markets is to stay the course and let share markets compound over time.
And if you are looking to invest or have just recently invested, this is a good reason why we have our tranching policy, where no matter what happens, it's not about a new client comes on to NZ Funds with a certain amount of capital. They wouldn't invest it all on day one. It's about tranching it over a number of months, if not years, to make sure that they are not susceptible to these sorts of events. And for those people that are going through that process, just do what you had already planned with your advisor.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed at all.
Fantastic. Thank you, James. Really great to chat. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We look forward to talking with you again soon.
New Zealand Funds Management Limited is the issuer of the NZ Funds Active Income Series, NZ Funds Active Inflation Series and NZ Funds Active Growth Series, together the NZ Funds Active Series, as well as the NZ Funds KiwiSaver Scheme, the NZ Funds Managed Superannuation Service, NZ Funds Wealth Builder and NZ Funds Income Generator. For further information or to request a copy of the product disclosure statement for each of these, please contact NZ Funds or visit nzfunds.co.nz. This recording is provided for information purposes only. The information provided is not intended as a substitute for specific professional advice on investments, financial planning or any other matter. Past performance is not an indication of future returns.